So I redid all of my lights for a few reasons. One, Aperture keeps coming out with new lights that I haven't tested before and I want to get a chance to actually use them. Two, I want to do something about the fan noise in this environment based on the previous lighting setup that I used. And three, I wanted to unify the control of all of these different lights and fixtures into a single app instead of the multiple remote controls that I was using before that, and also give me the ability to use a single switch, which I showed at the beginning of this video. So today I'm going to share with you my experience in changing all these lights over, what I learned, what I found, because some of the results were actually quite surprising. Let's get undone. Gerald Undone. He's crazy. What's happening, everybody? I'm Gerald Undone, and I'm out of diapers. So I've got my notes here for each of the lights. Let's go over them one at a time and talk about them and give you little mini reviews and that kind of thing. So the first light, the main light here, the key light, let me turn that off and on. I'm gonna do a little bit of lights on and off. It shouldn't be like strobe type flashes, but if you're super sensitive to any flashing light at all, just wanted to give you a heads up starting now. So if I turn this off, you can see which light we're talking about here. This is with no key light, and then that's with the key light on. And we'll do a deconstruction where we put all the lights in one at a time at the end. So this is now the 600C Pro behind the Aperture Light Dome 150, which is a ridiculous modifier, by the way. A bunch of this stuff is going to be overkill. I realize that. Again, it was all for testing purposes. But when I first set this modifier up, first of all, just setting it up was absurd. Trying to get inside and push all the rods down compared to using the typical Light Dome 2. Before, over here, I had the 300X with the Light Dome 2. So putting this modifier on, it's so much bigger than the Light Dome 2. And when I first set it up, it like literally made me laugh. And then I could step inside of it and almost spread my arms completely, like one of those old like National Geographic covers of like the dude standing inside of like the Megalodon mouth, whatever. That's what it felt like when I was inside this modifier. It's absurd for a modifier in a home studio space like this. But I thought I'd give it a try. And it's working, and it looks good. I'll show you comparison images before and after in a minute, because I'm sure if some of you are watching this video, you go, it looks the same as it always did, and it does mostly look the same. The differences are subtle, but that was on purpose. I wanted to see if I could achieve all the other results without giving up the image that I had worked on in the last couple of years. So the other reason for choosing the 600C Pro is color and noise. So from a color perspective, the C variants of the Lightstorm lights, whatever, they allow you to adjust the green magenta shift on the lights, where the X lights only allow you to adjust the temperature. You can also adjust the temperature on the C lights. So what this allows me to do is compensate for if a light, greens up over time, I can compensate for that. But also, even if you're using all Aperture lights, which I am in here, or any other brand, you'll often find that depending on the light and the modifier, that one light may be a little bit more green, one might be a little bit more magenta. And so you get used to adjusting color temperatures, but you don't always compensate for that green magenta problem. So having the 600C Pro allows me to dial that in perfectly. And I was even taking my Sekonic C800, this is how like extra I was with this process. And I would, hold it up here, take a measurement at my face, adjust the green magenta, adjust the temperature until I could get sort of the entire area in and around here to all come in at like 5600 Kelvin at 0 green magenta. And so having, the ability to measure it with a spectrometer, but also being able to actually change the lights so you don't have to do that in post, makes for a much better starting point. So that's amazing. The second thing is about noise. So when I was running the 300X there, the 300X only has 2 fan modes, always on and auto. And if you're trying to do noise reduction, always on is generally better than auto, but always on is quite a bit louder. Anyway, you can set these lights to a silent mode. And what that does is reduce the total power that they're only allowed like 60 watts instead of 600 watts, but then the fans don't run at all. And so I knew that with the 600D Pro, so I tried it with the 600C, and it's the same thing. I have it now running at 100% on silent, which is like 100% on a 60-watt light. And it's enough to get the exposure that I want with this light, but it's completely silent now, which is great. And I've put the 300X as the hair light now, which we'll talk about in a minute. And because it's now lower and so much farther away, if I just go completely quiet in this room now and you have a listen, there's like no noise at all. And I really, really like that. Again, it doesn't just, I've been using Isotope RX, noise remover anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But for me, there's a bit of a win to be like, it's perfectly silent in here. I like that. Now, when it comes to actually comparing the before and after in here, like I said, the difference is quite subtle. I'm looking at it here on my phone, so I can kind of talk you through what I see. I'll put it up on the screen. But the lighting in the before was a bit more, classical. It's kind of brighter on one side of my face. There's a bit more of like a Rembrandt thing going on. There is a bit more greeny yellow on the one side of my face because the 300X is greener than the 600C Pro, and I can even dial in the 600C Pro to be more accurate. But yeah, so slightly brighter on one side of my face and slightly greener, yellower over light. And now if we compare that to the new image, you'll notice that the shadows on my face are actually a bit more complex, which I like. It's not perfectly clear what's going on. It's not exactly flat lighting. There is depth to the shadows. I like that there's some hotter spots up on my temple from the hair light. I like that there's a bit of a shadow on both sides, and it adds a bit more shape to my face. If you look from one shot to the next now, my face almost looks wider in the before and a bit more squared off, where in the new one it's a bit more like narrow and refined in the cheekbones, which I like. However, there is definitely, this is my first sort of tip, diminishing returns in parabolic softbox size, depending on the distance. So if I was just over a meter away with the Light Dome 2, and now I'm maybe 1.33 meters away with the Light Dome 150, it's not going to be like night and day. Oh, it's so soft. The other one was so harsh. And there is one negative to going bigger, which is something to consider. And that's if you look into my eyes, the catch light on the new setup is not as pronounced as it was on the old one. And that's because a sort of smaller, brighter, spottier source is going to create a brighter, more refined catch light in your eye, where the newer light, you can actually see that the catch light is softer and bigger, which means it's a little bit less, punchy of a catch light. Now the shot is quite even in terms of exposure on both sides of the frame like this. So when I do those setups with guests, sometimes I have two people like me and somebody else, we're both going to get a nice lighting rather than sort of whoever sits over here gets one and whoever sits over here gets a little bit different. And they're also still set up to not have reflections in glasses, which is great. So yeah, diminishing returns on softness, keep that in mind. Just having a massive modifier isn't necessarily going to make a big difference. The idea is that now you can have this bigger modifier a little further away and achieve the same softness as you could, but putting them in the same position, if they're both already hitting maximum softness, it's not really going to make a difference, right? But keep in mind that you will have a less pronounced catch light in your eye. Now, getting back to the color thing, something that's important to me is color accuracy, which is why I was talking about the green magenta shift. So this is just for fun for the nerds out there, but something that I like to do to make sure that not only is my image color accurate, but that all of my cameras match up, is that once I dial in the lights, so once I have, I take my Sekonic and I get all these measurements and I tune all the lights to the way that I like them, then I'll bust out the DSC Labs Chroma du Monde, and for a Cameline chart actually, and I'll custom white balance each camera to sort of the central gray area, and then I will also get a shot of me sort of holding the chart like this for, say, the main camera there, and then I'll get one for my B camera down here, and maybe one over here for like the C camera, and then I'll bring all these into DaVinci Resolve. I'll check the white balance, which normally at this point is almost like perfect because the lights were set up and then I custom white balanced of this, but if there's anything minor I need to adjust, I can do that. And then I'll go into the hue and saturation curves, and I will make sure that every color is perfect on the vector scope with this Cameline chart, and that each one of the cameras has the same exposure using the exposure bars and has the same color accuracy or whatever. So then I can just switch back and forth between all the cameras and they're identical. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that the 600C Pro is amazing because it's made that process even easier for me, less work in post, which is always great. But also I thought I would share with you how I match all my cameras. Again, overkill, you can get away with less, but this is also me sort of fighting against some of the comments. Sometimes are like, I feel this way about your color. I feel this way about your color. It doesn't matter how you feel. My color is perfect. It couldn't be more dialed in. Whether you like it or not, that's up to you. But I put a tremendous amount of effort into making sure that all the cameras match and that all the cameras are as perfectly accurate as they possibly can be. We're going to talk about the fill light a little bit, which is the 600D Pro. It's the same as it was before, but shout out to Aperture on the 600s. They're very expensive and probably way, way overkill for home studio. But if you've got unlimited budget and you're like, hey, you know what, I just want to be able to do this or that, you can do pretty tremendous things. I've now tweaked it because of how big this light is. I wanted to lower the output of this light so that there at least would be a slight bit of shadow over here. I now have this 600D Pro running at 1% power, 1% on silent mode. So it's like silent mode is already 10% and then it's on 1% of that 10%. I'm gonna turn it off though so you can see still how much, by the way, I'm using the Sidus Link app with the console version so I can just turn all the lights on or off. So if I turn off the 600D Pro, look what it does. That is all that, so like you can see the difference, the contrast ratio on my face now, as well as sort of like how moody this shot is. Just having the 600D about 2 meters away with a Lantern 90 on top of it, and there's a bit of bounce obviously in the sound panels, but just having that, look what it does. That is a tremendous amount of light. Oh, and I got a new tube light on the shelf up here, let me show you. So I typically use that when I want to light that shelf for shooting things like test charts or whatever, and I want a nice even light. Before I was using smaller Nanlite Pavo tubes, and they're fine, like, they're good lights and I like them, but I've noticed that it's an issue because they're battery powered, that often I would come in and want to shoot test chart and then one of them would be dead or they'd only work for a few seconds. And so you try to charge them, and I did notice that over time that charging was an issue. On one of them it would accept like USB-C to C power delivery, but the other one wouldn't. It would only take a USB-C to USB-A, so then it just became kind of tedious charging them. So I wanted a mains power tube light, and then I noticed that Amaran had a 2-foot one that is the same thing as these ones. You can have a battery handle or you can run them on mains. So I'm running this on mains now, but most importantly, I want to talk to you about magnets, because I've got some new magnets that I'm obsessed with, and I feel like anybody that has a studio should have some of these, as long as you got some ferrous to stick them to. But the small Nanlite tubes, they had magnets built in, so to stick them to something. But the Amaran tubes do not, so I had to come up with a magnet solution. And at first I was using the 3M adhesive for the like neodymium strip magnets, but that wasn't a great solution. So now I've got these, which are the puck magnets that, you know, they claim they can do 90 pounds. I don't know about that, but they're very, very strong. And you can get them in either a 1/4 20 thread or a 3/8 16 thread. So you can get them for the common mounts that you would need. And those tube lights have 1/4 20s and 3/8 all over them. So I've just got 2 of these now on each side, and just thwack, they just like stuck super well to the shelf. And because of the distance between the top and bottom of these, there's enough space that I can actually stick my finger up and just turn the light on and off. And they work almost like a cable routing thing between between where the magnet is and the light. So it's just so perfect. They're a little bit more expensive than some of the other magnets that I've bought on Amazon. Like, you know, you're looking at like, I don't know, 20 bucks for 4 kind of thing, or maybe more. They're not cheap, but they are just such an ideal solution that I think you grab a 4-pack of these and you will be very happy. If there was one, like, you know, I'm not one to make videos about like, oh, Christmas shopping lists for filmmakers, whatever. But if I were, this would be them I put on and be like, get these 1/4 20 or 3/8 magnets for the filmmaker you love or whatever. But no, for studios, these things are outstanding. You can stick a camera on them and then stick the camera with magnets. I can prove it, watch. A7S3, 1/4 20 on the bottom. Stick this in, and look. It's so strong. Like, did you hear that thwack? Like, it's not gonna move at all. And even to take it off, like, it twisted the shelf. So yeah, magnets. Now, the hair light behind me is the 300X that was originally the key light. So that one looks like this. Let me turn it off and on. So you can see it's adding, it's illuminating my hair. It's also giving me a rim on both of my shoulders here, off and on. And yeah, I think it looks nice. It lights up this side of the table, which compared to the light that I had before, you can see that, again, remember I said the 300X is kind of greenish. You can see that this side of the table does have a bit of that green yellow that was on my face before. With the previous light that I had, which was the Godox VL150, it's more on the magenta side. So neither is perfectly neutral, but I went from one to the other. The reason why I ended up going with the 300X originally, as part of my new aperture setup, is I was gonna go with the Amaran 100D. I thought that's an ideal choice for this situation. But the reason why I wanted to switch in the first place is twofold. So the Godox, obviously I can't use it on the aperture Sidus app. It uses its own remote, which is clumsier and worse than the aperture remote, so I'm not even on a single remote control. And studio mode is kind of an issue. Switching to the 100D from Amaran solved the dual control problem. Now I could put it on the app, and that was fine. So that's one problem down. But the other reason why I was having issues with the Godox VL50 was that if ever the power would go out in our neighborhood, even if it was for a few minutes and then come back on, I would return to the studio and the light would be on, because killing the power and then returning it, the Godox didn't know what to do, so just was like, I guess I was on, and it just turned itself back on. So unless you like hard unplugged it from the wall whenever you left the studio, there was this chance that if maybe the power went out and came back on and then I wasn't at the studio for a week, the light could have been running that entire time for like a week while I was gone. So that's no bueno. The only option I really had at that point was to turn off the breakers to the studio, which is the breakers I have, I don't think are rated for switching, and that's not the best way to do things. It means my charging panel doesn't work. There's all kinds of problems, right? So the 100D still has that same problem, and this is something I've noticed with the Amaran lights. Maybe not all of them, but definitely most Amaran lights compared to the more expensive Aperture Lightstorm ones, is that the Amaran ones don't typically have a studio mode control. And what studio mode does is, at least for the Aperture lights, when you turn it on, it means that if you resume power, the light will come back on, which is basically all these lights were having studio mode always enabled, because then, yeah, if the power goes out and comes back on, your lights turn back on. But the Lightstorm lights allow you to turn studio mode off, which means that if power resumes, the light does not come back on. So just having that option is great, because that way, if you do want to control your lights from a single breaker, great, put them all on studio mode. And if you don't want to have them come back on when the power returns, turn studio mode off on all of them. But unfortunately, the Amaran 100D, even though it would solve all those other problems more cost effectively, didn't solve that problem. So I just took my 300X and made that the hair light and boxed the new Amaran 100D back up. It only got 2 minutes of use. Now, that studio mode issue also moves on to the tube lights back here, which originally were Nanlite Pavo tubes. And now I'm using the Amaran tubes from Aperture, mainly, like I said, because I wanted to test them out. I haven't really used them before. I get to put them on the Sidus app, which is great. So I can turn them both off here. So there's the purple one and there's the orange one. And like I said, in a minute, we'll rebuild all the lights from dark so that you can look at them. But the difference that so remember I said the breaker was one way to solve my problem, is I could just sort of flick the breaker off when I left the studio. The Nanlite Pavo tubes have a built-in battery. So, and there's no way to, as far as I know, disable it without taking the light apart. So if you kill the breaker, then these lights still stay on battery power until the battery runs out, which again is an inefficient, mess. So the advantage of the Aperture, or the Amaran ones, Aperture, Amaran, whatever, the Amaran tube lights is that they have a battery with them, but it's a handle. So you can just opt to not have the handle attached and then just run the lights just on mains power. So now if I were to kill the breaker, these lights would turn off. All the lights would turn off and it would work as intended. However, regarding their studio mode, because they're Amaran lights, they're studio mode always on kind of thing. So if I do kill power and then resume power, the light will turn on automatically. Again, I wish that wasn't the case, but I came up with a solution for all of it, which is great. And I'm going to tell you about that right now. So, one more advantage, by the way, to the Amaran lights is that despite them both being rated as 4-foot lengths, I guess, the actual usable tube portion, probably because the battery and stuff like that is an external optional thing for the Amaran lights, you're getting more usable light length on the Amaran lights than I was with the Pavo tubes. But other than that, I mean, it's a tube light. These ones are great, no complaints about them. And the fact that the battery is removable, detachable, means you could probably replace them, get multiple batteries, or just run out of mains. It's an upgrade overall, in my opinion, over the Pavo tubes. And I like the design, like the interface a little bit better. Once you start using a lot of Aperture stuff, then you see another, Amaran interface and you go, okay, I know how all this works. It looks just like my Aperture MCs or whatever. So there's a bit of that familiarity from the design language, which I think is important. Choose whichever brand you like, but then it's easier if you stick with one brand rather than having 3 or 4 different brands like I had before, because then you're constantly trying to remember everybody's menus and interfaces and stuff like that. So for me, this is nothing but upgrades. But okay, master switching. So as you saw in the beginning of the video, I used one switch to turn on all the lights. Now, the way that I was able to do that is that in the studio, just luckily, there is an outlet that is powered by that switch. I guess the idea is if you wanted to plug a lamp in there, then you can control the lamp from the switch. So I used that switch to then route the lights to that outlet and separate them from other aspects like my charging station or my computer or whatever else. So that way I'm only controlling the lights. They're only controlled from that switch. And now, because of the non-batteries on the tubes and the changes to having the studio modes on the 300X and everything, I can just flick the switch, all the lights turn off when I leave the studio. If power goes out and comes back, nothing makes a difference. They all just stay off. It's great. Then I come into the studio, I flick one switch, and all the lights turn on. And this has, after like 2 years of shooting, almost 2 years of shooting in this studio, I've learned that when you have too many things that turn on or enable or put cards into or press record on, whatever, you forget something like almost every time. I have some videos that are like up on the channel just because I noticed in edit I didn't want to reshoot that like, there was a light off the whole time. Because before, the process is I would come into the studio, I'd flick on one switch, turn on a couple lights, turn on a camera, put a battery in over here, turn that on, flick on the tube light, flick on the other tube light, turn on the hair light. Oh, but maybe that time I didn't remember to turn on the hair light. You know what I mean? So having the ability to just come in and go, switch on, all the lights are on. So it's more like switch on the lights, get working on the camera. And it's so much easier. I would recommend that if you can do that, if you can unify as many steps as possible so that there's fewer steps for you to have to do to record correctly, do it. It will make a difference. The more videos you record, the more errors you're gonna have. So if you can solve this, it's quite important. So I'm really happy with that switch. And I think it's great. And its location just happens to be lucky too, that when I come into the studio, I kind of walk by it, flicking on, all the lights are on. And I put a purple star on it, so I know which switch is which. Which switch is which. Okay, so let me walk you through sort of all the lights now so you can see them. Oh, by the way, there's this other feature I really like called Quickshots in the app, which you can set all the lights the way you want them, and then you can save all of the lights, now that they're on one app, as a quick shot. So I could make, like for example, I could turn this one down and turn this one up, and then I could turn the purple way up and the orange way up, but turn the key light way down like this. So maybe this is a setup I like. And then I can go into quick shots and choose save to quick shots, and then it will save this thing. But then if I want to switch back to the original one, this might flash. Avert your eyes if flashing is a problem. I just press my saved one, and it will put all the lights back to the way it was before. I love the idea of having these like presets of all the lights. It's really, really, really convenient. So I could set up like a moody one and a B-roll one and a A-roll one. So that's kind of great. Okay, this is nothing on. So first, let's turn on the. Well, I'll give you what the key light looks like on its own now. So that's just the 600C Pro behind the Light Dome 150. So you can see the shape that it's adding to my face. You can see that I have a very severe shadow over here, but I'm getting like a wrap almost all the way around to the edge of my cheekbone, which I find kind of interesting. And then if we fill it with the 600D at 1%, that's that. And you can see we're getting almost like a symmetrical vignette now across, which I like quite a bit. It really draws the eye in. And then if we throw the hair light on top, boom, like that. If I take the 600D off, so you can see just the hair light, a little bit easier to see, that's what it's doing. It's providing a little balance on the shelf. It's providing the rim, and then we'll put the fill back in, the 600D Pro. And then the tubes, purple on the one side and orange on the other. And I tweaked the color a little bit and brought them down. I found in the previous shot that one of them was a little bit hot, a little bit distracting. So that's the overall lighting setup. Like I said, pretty similar to what it was before, but now it's silent. It's on a universal switch. I can control it all with a single app. It is more color accurate. It's giving me a little bit better shape in the face. It works better for two people. Small adjustments, but I'm quite happy with it. So to wrap up, I just want to give a big thank you to Aperture for, helping me with this video. We talked ahead of time about like, what lights do you need? And, then they helped me strategize and figure out which lights and modifiers to go with. And I'm happy with pretty much all of the solutions. But beyond that, just thanks for the support over the years. Aperture's always been there supporting my channel as well as other content creators. These last few years on YouTube, Aperture's been just helping out YouTubers all over the place. So big thank you to them. That's why I constantly have their like billboards in my shot to thank them for all the support over the years. I'll put links to all the products that I talked about in the description below. And I hope that you found this video interesting or helpful in some way. All right, I'm done.